Have you ever found yourself sinking into an image, feeling almost as if it's pulling you in? That's how I feel while looking at liminal spaces, or at least I used to. Recently, with the publishing of video games based on liminal spaces that failed to make me feel anything at all, I started to wonder, why did I feel such strong connection to them in the first place? And while searching for an answer, I realized that these haunting photos hold the key to understanding the loneliness epidemic happening right now. My name is Juno, you're a local Mothman. Welcome to my channel where I explore the many sides of the internet, art, and how they make us feel. If you enjoy your stay, please consider subscribing. I'm on a mission to hit 20k subscribers before New Year's Eve. Biggest thank you to my 3 patrons, Fungus Finder, EllieJBR, and Zachary Hagen. And before we dive deep into our psyches to find answers, let's first establish what liminal spaces are. These images resonate with so many people, as evidenced by the countless videos and posts dedicated to the subject. Just take a moment to look at the poetic and thoughtful comments where people share their thoughts and feelings. You might be surprised to discover just how many liminal spaces are present in your own life and how they affect you. So, what are liminal spaces? Even though the definition seems to be very clear-cut, liminal spaces are places of transition, the places in between an escalator, a corridor, or a bus stop. The answer seemingly depends on who you ask. Originally, liminal spaces, or more specifically the backrooms, were a 4chan creepypasta, but something about them was electric, and soon liminal spaces far outgrew their origin, becoming a visual aesthetic. During my research, I found a bunch of different people explaining what liminal spaces are, and just as you might expect, all of them defined them a bit differently. However, one word kept being repeated in every explanation I found: feel. So, what are the feelings that make a liminal space a liminal space? Something is very off about this place. It almost feels as if you're not supposed to be looking at it. There was some kind of line, and you crossed it. You fell through some border that separates time and space, and ended up here, in this waiting room, all by yourself. What do you feel? Is it fear? Maybe at first, but as the time draws on, how long has it been exactly anyway? You realize that there really is no danger in sight, and unless the place itself will devour you, then there is nothing to be afraid of. The places you discover on your trek are places you're not supposed to stay in for long periods of time. Desolate train stations and airport bathrooms, in and out. Everything is just pleasant looking enough to not be distracting. And through it all, there is this deep sense of wrongness. The off-white walls and the subtle hum of the fluorescent lights is making you uncomfortable. Everything feels slightly off, and yet somehow you feel like you recognize this place. Have you been here before? Well, no, I don't believe so. While nostalgia is truly an oppressing force that is difficult to escape, I don't think that the spaces themselves are nostalgic. They might be familiar to you if you live in specific places in the world, but I think that what is actually nostalgic are the feelings they awaken in us. These images are often edited or shot in a way that makes them feel larger than they actually are, and everything about them feels mysterious and new. It's almost as if we're experiencing the world from the perspective of a child, but instead of regressing to that age, we are re-experiencing them as adults. And since we have the context of our lived experiences, we immediately notice that something is off. Many of these places, pools, offices, shopping malls, hotels, they are designed to be filled with life and people. They have a clear purpose. What happens if that purpose is lost? The natural world is spontaneous in a predetermined way. Weeds sprout within the cracks of pavements, trees wove their trunks and crowns to get more sunlight, eels migrate, a cow will eat a chick for some additional nutrients. is controlled chaos. These spaces, on the other hand, are mostly artificial, created, crafted, designed with a clear and singular purpose. And without that purpose, they become empty. When it gets cold, birds migrate. When a puddle dries out, frogs move to a pond. If a tree falls, it gets digested and a new one grows in its place. But a shopping mall without stores becomes white walls and useless pillars. A daycare center without children, rainbow-colored nightmare fuel, and a corridor without an exit, a pointless labyrinth. Kenopsia, as defined by the man that coined the term, John Koenig, is a sorrow coming from seeing emptiness. An emptiness of your childhood bedroom once you pack all of your belongings to move. Your grandmother's empty armchair. Revisiting your school after years and somehow still feeling sad that none of your ex-classmates are there. Kenopsia is the ability to physically sense an absence. These are all sad situations, but they are singular, a self-contained melancholy. When crowded places become desolate, it feels like the world ended. Right before the height of COVID, I was living in Rome, and on some nights, me and my uncle would drive around in his old beat-up van over the streets that usually were brimming with tourists, and yet it was just us, and a couple of other people loitering around. In those moments, it felt like this grandiose city built for millions, this cultural landmark for humanity that survived war after war. It felt like it was built just for me. However, I knew that soon the world would wake up again. No matter what, you cannot stop it from moving on. And that's what makes liminal spaces feel so different. They feel private, not only in that nostalgic sense that they remind you of your own memories, but looking deeply into these images, it truly feels like no one else is there. There is some kind of pure, unbridled potential of an endless world. If no one else but you can access it, then it's your kingdom. You can vandalize and tear at the ugly yellow wallpaper. You can scream your heart out. You can cry, you can run, you can swing on the swing set like you used to. And no one would be there to judge you. Liminal spaces let you experience that never-ending rush of freedom in spaces that you normally would never get to do that in, since usually they are supposed to be brimming with people and noise, but now they're eerily quiet. And what really gets to me is that a lot of the architecture shown in these images are places that were built during a time of opulence, both in design but also culturally. Maybe right now these places are just taken out of context, edited, but soon enough many of them will become like that, abandoned. It's only inventable that they will with time either be gutted and then repurposed or abandoned to later fall into utter decay or to be torn down so that something new can be in its place. It's difficult for me to think about. I don't like change, and so aren't liminal spaces just perfect? They're frozen and eerily still, and that stillness feels final. In these transitional spaces, nothing ever changes. Limbo. In Catholic theology, it's a place for those that don't deserve hell, but still are unable to reach salvation. In our world, the state of limbo is a peculiar one. When we say that someone or something is in limbo, we usually use the word stuck. And it's for a good reason, since limbo is not a waiting room to heaven, it's the precipice of hell. And these images do look like the precipice of hell, one that we seemingly can't turn away from, as we're repeatedly drawn into them. When I think of liminal spaces and the feelings they give me, I'm thinking of ending things, or mindlessly wandering around Madatsuki's dream world. The endless biomes of Minecraft, empty multiplayer games. But if I were to point at a single piece of media that feels liminal, it would be the work of Edward Hopper. All of the scenes in Hopper's paintings are well lit, opulent and glowing, and yet they feel so empty. The people Hopper portrays are often alone, or alternatively, stand out somehow, almost as if they know you're looking at them. However, one painting that I thought of immediately was this one, called Automat. I cannot stop staring at this image. It speaks to me in ways difficult to describe. In this painting, the woman portrayed sits by herself in some kind of establishment. She's well dressed. Was she going somewhere? Is she on her way back home? Is she waiting for someone? She's holding her cup and looking down at it. And while the place she's sitting in is well lit, behind her the world is a black void, only reflecting the few light fixtures in an endless parade. What is she waiting for, all by herself? Is she waiting for something to happen? But for what exactly? The world is already moving incredibly fast. It's changing at a pace that is hard to keep up with. There's so much to do and see. I am a part of that now too. I understand that. I am supposed to overstimulate you, promise you everything under the sun, make you feel specific things, all so that you watch my video I poured my heart into for maybe a minute longer, so that YouTube can play one more ad and send good signals to the algorithm. And why can't she just be content, staying where she is? She doesn't have to look at the void. She already made her decision to turn her back to it. The liminal space she occupies is well lit. Isn't that enough for her? What more would she want? And why would she even want to leave? The world is a cruel place. It has never been kind, but now, with the internet, there have been many more ways to be mean. We as a society are surveilling ourselves, cringing, bullying, and ripping to shreds anyone and anything that doesn't perfectly fit in. And what if that happens to her? What if she steps out of line and says or does something wrong? Isn't it just so much better to stay in a place where that can't reach her? Where she can be free from judgment, free from change, from other people and their issues, just her, her cup of coffee, the void she just turned away from, and the never-ending silence. Life stagnates in the ugliest of ways when you're at your prime. There is this feeling of urgency, nowadays only elevated by our feeds, that are constantly letting you know how your old friends from high school are engaged, how a person much younger than you rose to insane amounts of fame and wealth, how everyone is doing more, how much better they are than you. Meanwhile, there you are, lost in transit, scared to leave your comfortable limbo and look people in the eyes. While everyone else is experiencing life, you're watching them do that. Maybe you're angry about it, scrolling through their happiness with jealousy. Or maybe you imagine yourself being there with them, laughing, having fun. Maybe your heart is a waiting room or a bus stop, something that's supposed to be filled with people that love and care about you, but instead it's empty, eerily quiet. Maybe to get rid of the silence, you hung up posters of your favorite characters, put on a movie or a live stream, and listen to some music. But in the end, nothing ever changes. We're living through a loneliness epidemic. It's been studied and proven to be overwhelmingly affecting young adults. When 1 in 3 young people feel lonely, we have a problem, especially when loneliness increases the risk of suicide by 16 times over. There are dimensions to our loneliness, different kinds of it, but it all stems from something lacking, something not being the way it's meant to be. Loneliness can be chronic and situational, emotional and social, and finally, existential. Existential loneliness is a feeling of utter and complete disconnection from others, from your culture, from life, from yourself. And I think that liminal spaces give us a window to an existentially lonely soul. There is something very off about this place, and yet it feels like home. On one side it's claustrophobic, oppressing, anxiety-inducing, with a monster looming just out of sight. On the other, it's freedom. These liminal spaces are ideal for isolation. After all, they are stuck. There are no exits or entrances. Time may as well not exist in these states. They just are. There is no wavering, no change, just the solid walls and unmoving ceilings. No one will find you, and if no one can find you, then nobody can hurt you. Everybody left already. Was it an evacuation or a natural exodus? You don't know. Now it's just you, the unnerving humming of the brilliant fluorescent lamps, and the smell of stale air. How long has it been since they left? Minutes? Days? Months? Years? Eons? Maybe they were never here in the first place. And it feels good at first. The complete disconnection from everyone else is right, safe and comfortable. You're where you belong. But after a while it gets unbearable. The uncomfortable feelings come back flooding in. Maybe because you're bored. Maybe because you stumbled across something that resembled a better place, a happier one. And so you wait. This can't be it, right? Something's gonna happen soon, right? This can't be it. The empty hallways, abandoned parking lots. This can be what life truly feels like. It can't be this lonely. And yet it is. When loneliness consumes you, it's impossible to get rid of. It digs its way through every aspect of yourself. Maybe you're lonely because you're unlovable, stupid, ugly, boring. Maybe you're lonely because that's just the human condition. Everyone is lonely. This is just how it's meant to be. It's actually the better option to be alone. When you're alone, you have complete control over yourself and your situation. If you're alone, no one can judge or hurt you. And you can take care of yourself just fine. You have work or homework to do, chores, taxes. And if you're lonely, you can go to Twitch or YouTube and watch someone. Some pleasant noise, stimulated company, when no one can perceive you. During wintertime, I find myself being enchanted by the snow-covering mountain ranges and the quickly approaching darkness. I live for the times when everyone else is asleep. The world feels more peaceful that way. It feels more real. And I feel like myself. Have you ever felt like it was your time to go? Liminal spaces feel like that to me. A last safe space before the inventable. I think about getting lost in these spaces, no clipping out and staying there, and I feel a pang in my heart. Not of fear, but of longing. I wish I could just disappear into these unwelcoming walls, and musty carpets, and empty parking lots, and abandoned houses. The precipice of hell. A waiting room where, since time doesn't exist, no one is there with you. You can sit and wait as long as you want to, with your back turned to the void. But the thing is, I no longer want to stay there. I want to leave. Recently, I've seen the hikikomori test being passed around on Twitter, and while doing it myself, I realized how far I've come. Now, my score is not ideal, which is not surprising, but it's much better than it would have been a year ago. It took me almost 5 years to get to a point where I actively want to leave the comfort of my personal limbo. This channel is actually something I first envisioned years ago. I wrote my Kitco script in 2022, but I was terrified. I wasn't ready yet. And 4 months ago, when I started, I also wasn't ready. But I forced myself to take a small step and just post my first video. And now I'm here talking to you. Even if my loneliness feels never ending, I'm choosing to try and leave regardless. And I hope that once you're ready, you leave too. Even though it might feel like it, you're not condemned to rot in limbo awaiting forgiveness. You can forgive yourself and leave. I think it's a tough lesson to learn, but one that's necessary. Even if the anxiety is crippling, unless you move to change, nothing will happen. You will wait forever trying to avoid the worst while missing out on the best parts of life. Even if there is no exit in sight right now, it doesn't mean the liminal space you're in right now is empty. If you're there, at least one light is on. And with that, maybe someday, you can invite someone else to come in and take a look. This abandonment is not the end. As long as you're somewhere in there, there is life. And maybe right now you're lost in the endless corridors, confused about your own purpose. But this is a transitional place. Please remember that this loneliness is a waiting room, not your destiny. Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe if you want to. And if you need a low-stakes community, you can hang around my channel. I am currently setting up a Discord server, so you can check that out. I try my best to make this a comfortable and fun space for you all and for myself. You can always follow me on Tumblr and shoot me a message, or go to my Patreon and chat with us about upcoming videos. I am incredibly grateful to have you all here with me, to have this opportunity. Thank you for sticking around, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye!